What's up, guys? How's it going? Um, I decided to do this recording with my webcam so I could say hi to you guys. Hope you guys are all doing awesome, doing well. I don't know how much time I have on this free version of Loom. So, anyways, I will just take you through this, and we'll see if I get cut off. I'm gonna have to do this in a part two, but I want to do this quickly anyway, so it doesn't take too much time and it's not a boring video. But so we've been on this topic this first week back of distance learning of doing supporting elements, and I wanted to just quickly go over a couple things that we've been taking from this section on supporting elements, and then have you do another activity that should only take you like just today to actually do. We talked last time about line work and borders and backgrounds or backdrops and their purposes in this sort of graphic design. It's incredibly important that you guys understand these because they can be super helpful to you. Number one, they don't draw attention to themselves, so uh, it's not going to be the main focal point artistically that somebody sees on your design. They're just going to see this as something that supports what it is they're looking at. So the three things that we looked about again, line, borders, and backgrounds, and what they mean. And I just wanted to show you or talk to you about a couple things. At any rate, what the supporting elements do is that there's kind of two areas um, that that they actually work in. Two sort of areas. The first being that it serves a utilitarian purpose. So they're supporting elements because, for utility's sake, they're helping sort of divide up space, make things more clear, that type of thing. It has more of a utilitarian purpose. Almost like in construction, how like the studs in your walls of your house or whatever hold it up. They're not actually seen, but they're there, and they serve a purpose. But you might build a house and you don't put any drywall up, and you want the studs exposed for aesthetics purposes, for artistic sake, for it to look kind of modern and cool. The same goes with this. So the second purpose would be for theme. So if you want to, if you're going to use a line, what color is the line going to be? How thick is it going to be? And it sort of adds to the theme of what it is you're looking at. So what I wanted to do, kind of keeping those two things in mind, that supporting elements are used for a utilitarian purpose, but they're also being used for an artistic purpose. Let's take a look at World of Warcraft. Great website. Gaming websites are really good for explaining supporting elements. So basically, what you see is all these three supporting elements in action, and that's what I had you guys do last time when you guys were doing scavenger hunts. So what you see here is you see some borders. So like when I hover over these different things, there's borders. You'll see some line work going on. Like for example here where these lines are separating these buttons. You see a line right here at the top that's separating that. And you see backgrounds, which in a lot of cases are just images, but there's also some backgrounds here. There's some video backgrounds, there's static backgrounds, which are just pictures. But then you got this like red sort of area back here that operates as background. So let's quickly look at each of these and talk about how those matter in terms of both in a utilitarian sense and an artistic sense. So let's start with line first. In a utilitarian sense, line is being used on this website to separate these key areas so that it's clearer for the person to navigate that. Um, the designer of this website could have left out these lines and just had just the words there. That would have been fine. But it helps understand that they're separate entities, probably because the spacing is pretty tight between these. Just that subtle little line right there. It doesn't take away from the look of this bar that it's sitting inside of. It helps just make it easier for the person to navigate. In terms of aesthetics or artistic reasons, which is reason number two that we use supporting elements, you can see that the color of these lines are there, and they sort of mirror this brown that's being used in the background. So color is an important element of art that's being brought into this, that's being added and used to help accentuate the theme. Some things are more obvious though. So here you got a utilitarian use of a line dividing this bar along the top. They felt it was necessary to put a line there. They could have just left the line out if they wanted to, but it just kind of, in these darker areas here, creates a separation between this top bar and the stuff that's behind it. What about borders, though? So you see, let's talk about utilitarian purpose of borders. It helps surround this on a website for utilitarian purposes, to make it understood that it's actually a button. So borders are great for that on websites. And so you could get really fancy with borders. Like, look at this border here. This is super cool. They could just use the word pre-purchase and maybe put a static graphic, but it actually animates, and it's got all this other stuff. So here you have the idea of borders, and you can see that it's used in a utilitarian purpose to make a button that you hover over, but also in an artistic sense, it adds to the theme of what's going on this particular design, which is for World of Warcraft. So it looks like armor, it looks like metal, it's sort of energized with this magic when you hover over it, that type of thing. And last but not least is your backgrounds. Backgrounds are a fantastic way that if you don't want to float graphics on top of a blank background, like black or white or just a flat color, you could do things like making it a little bit more dynamic by putting pictures behind it. And so if you see here, you're using this background, you got this text here, there's these moving graphics here. It's very exciting. It plays to this whole theme in terms of the idea of, in an artistic sense, of adding to the theme of World of Warcraft, showing you elements from the game. But also in a utilitarian purpose, it provides almost like a tabletop for all the other graphics to sit on top of it. It's the backbone of what's happening on this website for everything to be able to sit on top of it. So just pulling some things out of our blue book here that I actually brought home. In terms of line, border, and background, here's what he says about that. Borders can be made of lines, graphic elements, text, if you want to use text. That's what borders can be made out of. The same goes for lines. Lines and borders are kind of like on the same wavelength there, yet they're separate supporting elements, but they shouldn't draw attention to themselves. Okay. Background, some things to remember about background is a background, like a border, is a visual device used to contain and direct attention to a piece's content and message, but not to itself. A background can be made with a simple panel of color, or it can be used with images or textures or whatever you want, depending on what's relevant to the theme. It's up to you, though, as a designer, to use that graphic design instinct that you're going to develop over time if you get into this line of work that's going to start making your designs look that much better. And you just have to experiment, you just have to try it out and see. So what I've got for you guys is a quick little activity. Now, I know you've been running into issues with using, oh, I hope this is coming up actually. Darn it, I don't know if this is closing out, but let me see if my Loom is using it for, I hope this works. I may actually cut it off here, but anyways, I might have to re-record this, but we'll see. Okay, so I've switched over to Loom. I usually use Screencast-O-Matic, so I apologize, guys, but because you guys are having a hard time using Adobe and getting it on your computer, etc., I just thought, you know what, PowerPoint will actually work. It's not as powerful as Illustrator or Photoshop by any means, but you have access to it for free because you have a 365 account. You can put it on almost any computer, and you've got it, and it's not a resource hog like Photoshop or Illustrator. So that being said, what you're going to do for your little exercise here for some points is you're going to create two sides to this. Almost think of it as like splitting this in half. So what I did is I made a new blank PowerPoint presentation. The title slide, I switched it over to just a blank slide, so that way it got rid of the text, because I just want almost like a clean sheet of paper, almost like an artboard, if you will, like we would have in Illustrator. So if you're not sure how to do that, maybe get in touch with somebody at home or one of your brothers or sisters who can show you how to do this. I don't want to get into how to use PowerPoint, but it's super easy to set up a file, and hopefully you guys have made a PowerPoint by now. But anyways, that being said, you're going to take your little slide and you're going to imagine it's cut in half. And we're going to use little boxes, okay, about yay big, so you can just copy mine. And I have some text in here, and I'm going to change this up, but I just wanted to show you. And I want you to think of it in terms of utility and theme and art reasons on why you would use supporting elements. So we're still on this idea of supporting elements. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to insert a text box. So I'm just going to draw out my text box. And what's great about PowerPoint, you can just draw the size of your text box, and then you can type in what you want it to say. In this terms, I'm going to say utility. So that's one reason we're using supporting elements. Remember, I said there were two. It's for utility's sake and also for theme and art. And then from here, while I have it selected, I'm going to make it nice and big just to give a nice title to it. And then you can also set it to there. Now, what's cool about this is we can just copy, paste, Control-C, Control-V, like we would in our other software that we use. and put this over on this side and title this one theme. Okay, and I did it in all caps so it stood out or whatever. You can bold it, do whatever you want. And then I came up with one word for this first side. We're going to see how we can actually use borders, or backgrounds in a utility sense and backgrounds in a theme. Now, the whole idea with this particular one is we're going to pick one supporting element, which is going to be backgrounds. I hope you guys understand the uses of line and the uses of borders, because they kind of go hand in hand. Remember, for utility's sake, they separate areas, but they also enhance the theme. And you can change the color of lines, and you can change the color of borders to make them look like buttons, etc. They have their own place. I think they're especially helpful for helping organize things. You can have lines like divide up sections of your design space. But I really wanted to talk to you guys especially and have you guys do this little exercise on backgrounds, because you can run into some problems with backgrounds. Because of the stuff that sits on top of it, especially text, it suddenly becomes unreadable. And so that's not good. If your viewers can't actually read what the message is that you're actually trying to say, it could be a cost of an item or whatever, then it's going to fail as a design, and that's not good. So what I'm doing is I've made a few boxes here. So to actually make a box, you just go Insert, and then you can go into Shapes. And you got a whole slew of different types of shapes. Just stick with basic rectangles. So here I am in rectangles. I'm going to say, give me a rectangle. I'm going to draw that out, and it kind of does a really neat job, like snapping. Okay. And once you get your first one drawn, then you can just sit there and copy, paste, Control V, Control C, Control V. And you want to make a few of these little boxes and size them. Well, you don't need to size them if you're just copying and pasting. But starting off with the first one, put some text on top of it and just give it a word. It doesn't matter what the word is. Make sure it's relatively small. I said hello on this one. And I filled it with black. And I filled the background box with some color. All right. So again, to add text, you just simply go up to the top to Insert and go to Text Box and draw that out. And then you can copy paste your text boxes. But at any rate, so with this selected, you could see here, let's talk about contrast for a second there. So value, contrast, the difference between dark and light. If I put black text, for example, in this word hello on top of this bright sort of pink salmon colored background, it's totally readable. And you could call it a day and just go with it like that. But I want to show you some techniques for utilitarian purposes on how you can use background as a utility to make your text stand out in front of it, on top of it. Then we'll talk about theme in a second. So on the first one, it's not the best color, and hello doesn't really have anything to do with the background, but I'm going to change the word so it's something that, thematically speaking, a little bit more relevant to the colors it's sitting on top of. So I'll just use the word Easter. Okay, since it is Easter today, happy Easter, by the way. And black looks good, but it doesn't really apply to the theme of Easter. So if your client said, I want pastel colors and black's not one of them, then you got to figure out how to change that. Maybe they told you what colors would be, like light blue. So you might want to try light blue on this. So while you have it, double click to select it, you can change the text color to something like light blue. And what's happening here is a problem. If you sit back at it and you squint and you can't read it, there's a problem. You got to change something. You got to make this readable on your background. So this is what I wanted you to experiment with this. How can you make this more readable on a background, on a lighter background? And what's happening is the reason you can't see this is because the value contrast of these two colors, although they're both different, although they're both different colors, they fall in the same range of the same value contrast. So if you were to see them in grayscale, they're falling in the same range on the grayscale chart as they're just close to each other on a value grayscale. So if you saw it in gray, that it makes sense. And so we got to fix that. And you can't do things like, well, I'll just simply make it a darker blue because maybe the client told you had to make it that blue and the background had to be that pink color, etc. So one thing you could do is highlight it and simply try some things like bolding it. Maybe bolding it makes it better. No, that doesn't do anything. Maybe another way is to put a highlighter color behind it, okay, or put another box of color behind that text. Okay, that's a little bit better. You can read it. It's ugly, but you can read it. So that's something that I wanted you to know it does exist. So since it's lighter, maybe you put a darker color behind it to highlight it a little bit better, and then you'll be able to read it that much better. And so, of course, you're using Photoshop or Illustrator. This is going to come out looking really nice because you have so many more choices of colors. But here we are in PowerPoint, and we're just going to use what we have. But you guys get the idea in terms of making this a little bit more readable. And the cool thing about the utilitarian purposes of backgrounds is that they can help divide up the picture space. So pretend, we wanted to create 6 boxes here. We want to divide up that text a little bit better by putting colored blocks behind it is basically our purpose on this. So I'm just going to take that off for a second. And I'm going to try a drop shadow. You do have drop shadow in PowerPoint, but it doesn't give you any control over it. It just drops it in there. So what I'm going to do is go over here to Home, and right under my text, my font, there's a button for text shadow. And look at how much nicer just a drop shadow will work. Now, some of you might be going, wait a second, if I did this in Photoshop, I've got my layer styles and my layer effects, if you remember that. I can do drop shadows and I can control that. No, it's awesome. And I have both my light blue and then my pink on top of it. It looks readable. It works. So what I want you to do is create 6 of these and just use colors, different colors, and challenge yourself. Maybe pick a color of the background first. So once you have the background picked, you can go in and change that. So if I go under Insert, I believe there's a way you can do this. Can you click it? Yeah, okay. So if you right-click, you have these choices on Fill, okay? And maybe try a different color, maybe a darker green, and say, okay, now that I have this darker green, how can I make that readable with a color that is sort of in the same tonal range? So maybe I change this to a dark gray. Watch what this does. Okay, so pretend your client said that that's the way it's got to be, and maybe you call this one tree. Okay, how can you make that more legible? Would it be another color behind it, another color box behind it? Could I change? Can I contact the client and change that to a lighter color like white? Because that's one way you could do it if the client wants that and is okay with you guys to be able to do that. So go through, just make different ones and see if there's different techniques that you didn't think of that PowerPoint will allow you to do, by the way, to be able to make this more readable within the square that's on it. And then also understanding, how does this work in a utilitarian purpose? Now let's talk about theme. So this, what works really great for this is if you download textures. So what I did is I just went on Google and went to textures, and you don't need very big pictures for this either because we're just going to see this as, I went away there. I'm thinking it probably cut me off, which is going to suck because I'm going to have to redo this whole entire portion of this or whatever, but you guys won't see that anyway, so I'll just have to. So I could go with texture, etc. But I want you guys to download some of these textures, okay, and bring them into Illustrator, into their little respective boxes. Now, I'm not going to do all of this, but how did I get this inside of here? Well, I'm going to copy and paste. So once I get it drawn, I can copy one of these, by the way. So for example, if I grab this green one, I Control-C, Control-V, or Command-C, Command-V on a Mac. You guys are on a Mac at home, and I'm going to do it another time here. And I want to put pictures inside of here. So one way that I could do that is right-clicking it, okay? And I can go in and say Fill. Now, what do I want to fill it with? And maybe I don't want to fill it with a color. Maybe I want to fill it with a picture. So again, I right-clicked, and I chose Fill, and choose Picture, and it's going to bring it up. And I want to do a picture from a file. Now, you have to get your pictures off the internet first. So I'm going to go from a file. And in my Downloads folder, you can put it in your Downloads folder because it's just temporary. I'm going to grab this ice picture and say Insert. Okay, I've got some texture, some ice, and I'm going to click on this next one. And you might want to do this for all 6 that you're going to do. So you'll have 12 little boxes up on your screen. The ones with the utility side, which are the color, and then the theme side, which is the ones that's going to enhance the theme of what you're doing. And I'm just going to right-click and choose Fill, and then go Picture again. Browse from my computer, go to my Downloads folder, or wherever you saved your pictures from the internet. Choose my next picture. There we go. So I've got a couple pictures to work with, and then I want you to add some text that's relevant to what it is you're trying to show in the picture, and just see if it's readable. So the first one here looks like ice, okay? So I'm going to go insert text box, and I'm just going to draw out this, and I'm going to say ice. Okay. Now, an easier way, I think, to do this is instead of doing that, just grabbing your text box, copying it, Control C, Control V, and then dragging it over. Wait till you get the little plus sign over to your next one. Okay. And then change what it says. So there we go, ice. And then over here, I'll just leave that alone. I just wanted to show you guys how to like paste that in there. So again, let's say your theme of your design calls for ice and a background with ice, but you got to understand when you put elements on top of it or components on top of it, like text, for example, and you squint at it and you can't see what it's supposed to say, then there's going to be problems. So you want to make sure that you get that fixed if you possibly can. So here I've got the word ice, right? So think of ways that you can get this to work. Like, would it work if I used maybe a shade of this gray back here? It's relevant to the theme. So if I go to my color of my text and I choose something that looks like this bluish gray in the background, like this, is it readable? Can I see it? Can I squint at it? I can kind of read that a little bit. Maybe it helps to do it in all caps. And again, this all has to be passed by the person that's making the decisions, your client especially. Maybe in a bold font, is it more readable? Is it readable if I make it bigger? Is it readable if I make it bolder? All caps, there's all different types of choices. Maybe there's a glow option, right? I know there is in Photoshop. I know there's in Illustrator. So is there a glow option though in this? I don't know if you can add that. Probably not, but I just know there's a drop shadow. Drop shadows tend to like help a little, so it helps pop a little bit. But hopefully you guys get the idea on how to do this. And so what I wanted you to do is stick with the theme on these rightmost ones here that you do, these 6, by picking background textures. If it's a rock texture, maybe your word's rock, and you're challenging yourself by trying to make these words readable on a busy background. That's the biggest takeaway here. And that you guys are understanding that when using backgrounds, there's 2 purposes for it, just like there is other supporting elements when you're using line and border, is utility and theme are the purposes they serve, and they don't draw attention to themselves. This drop shadow is not so strong that I put it on the word ice that it draws attention to itself. And so that's pretty much it. Now, how you finish this up when you're all done and how you're going to turn it into me is you're going to turn this into a JPEG. So that's the great thing about using something like PowerPoint is it's a great way to lay out things, and then you can print them later on, which is kind of cool. So I'm going to go File, and I'm going to choose Export. And then you could do it as a PDF if you want to. I don't know if it lets you save as JPEG, but I'm going to browse. It's been a while since I used PowerPoint. I use other SlideShare stuff, but I'm going to pick where I want to save it. Let's say my desktop or my OneDrive, right? And then how can I save it? So I'm looking for JPEG. There it is, JPEG file. Okay, but it's file interchange format. I don't know if that's any different. And then I'm going to give it a name. Busy backgrounds, we'll call it. All right. That's kind of our theme here. Supporting elements number 2, if you want. So desktop there, and I hit save. Okay. And then which slides do you want to export? Well, I only have one, so you could say all slides or just this one. It doesn't matter. And that's it. Okay, so I saved it to my desktop, and I'm going to just see how it looks. See if it's on the desktop. I'm going to call it busy backgrounds. There it is. Busy backgrounds. Double click this. Actually, it's going to launch Photoshop. So click it. Right click it and choose the program you want to do. So if you go right click, we can go open with. And we could choose like paint or photos. There we go. Microsoft Photos. Just to take a look. Okay, perfect. So now I've got a JPEG that I can upload to Haiku. There's a Dropbox for this. Look for it. I wish you guys the best. This will be a couple days, due in a couple days. It's real easy to do. It'll probably take you all of like 15, 20 minutes to do, and you're done. I'm going to be coming back at you guys this week with another sort of topic from the Blue Book. This one's going to be about images and how you can take great photography with just your iPhone and have a good time. And I hope you guys are all doing well. I will see you guys later.